What's up, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Automatic Patient Podcast. I'm your co-host, Jordan Comstock. With me, Dr. Dan Nelson. What is up, Dan? How you doing?
Good. I'm working on my second zip fizz, so I'll be ready for the show. I'll be all hyped up, caffeinated like I usually
Here
am.
we go. Yeah, that's now we're talking.
I'm trying to make it a theme for every time that you ask me what's up. I'm like, just caffeinating, just getting.
Just get some energy for the morning. Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
that's me every morning too. So, the older I get, the more caffeine I need, it seems. Especially with my three young daughters wearing me out every day.
Oh yeah.
So anyways, dude, what's new with you guys?
Wow. So we just got back from Africa.
Hmm.
Did our Dental Legacy Foundation trip. Part two for this year, part two of three. So part
Great.
three leaves in a week and a half. But yeah, it was epic. Hey, we saw a leopard, which has been on the Big Five. They have this thing called the Big Five,
Uh-huh.
animals that are out there, and the leopard's elusive, and we saw a leopard. So check that off the old
The bucket
bucket
list. There
list.
we go.
Yeah.
That's
It was
cool.
rad. Like we were on the
And
Rafiki River and saw it up on a rock. I don't even know how our guide saw it. The guide's like, "Oh, there's a leopard over there." We're like,
it's a casual leopard.
"Oh my gosh!" It
Casual
was
leopard hanging out.
Yeah, I felt very safe. It wasn't going to jump off and kill me. It was great.
Jeez. Have you ever seen those videos, at least like in the mountains of here in Utah and probably Idaho, where the cougars pop out
Oh
and
yeah.
people when they're driving? That would freak me out. Or when they're hiking, that would freak me out.
Well, on our safaris, it's super common to get within 10 feet of lions, like
Jeez. Yeah, no,
cheetah,
I'm not doing that.
lions. Yeah, like
No
super
thanks.
close. I have epic video of us like parked next to this cheetah eating a zebra. And
Jeez.
like we're so close to it. I'm like, oh my gosh, if this cheetah decides that it doesn't like us, and it
Yeah.
feels like the guides always park with me closest to the animal. I'm like, is there what I must bug the driver or something when we go on these things? Because they're like, let's put him closest so that if the leopard or lion leaps up, this gets that dude. So I'm always
Yeah.
that guy. But it was epic. We saw I don't have the numbers back yet for the patient count that we had, but yeah, we had some really cool, awesome experiences there my favorite is probably I won't use her full name. I'll just call her Dr. Bryn. Dr. Bryn came with us, and one of the things that she specializes in her office is cosmetic veneers, and so
Oh, cool.
composite veneers. Excuse me,
Oh, okay.
and one of the techs at the hospital that our clinic is in, she had some really bad fluorosis and was super self-conscious of her smile. And so Dr. Bryn gave her some composite veneers, and the girl was just over the moon. She would cover up her face anytime she would smile or laugh before that, and she was like, she
Really?
smiled, yeah, total like tears of joy, like she was ecstatic. And so, doing little things like that have been that's a that we're able to even do that now, because our first trips were all just like infection, treating
Sure.
massive problems. And now we've built it up to a point, which was our goal, is to get it to be self-sufficient. We've got a Tanzanian doctor in the clinic now, which was a big
Mm.
deal for us. And so
And that's something unique you guys are doing with your foundation. You're actually building like the infrastructure there with like the doctor that's there.
exactly. Yeah. Our
So
goal is
cool.
for us to not have to be there anymore, so that we can go on to the next location and do the same thing
Yeah,
again. So,
that's rad. I love
yeah.
it. So you're starting week 3 here. When? Is it next week you were saying?
Visit three. Yeah. Trip three is going in a week and a half. Yep. And they'll
Okay.
be there for 2 weeks.
And is Ryan still lost down there and
Right.
with the
Yeah,
leopards?
I checked in on him this morning. He seems to be okay. Yeah.
He's doing good. He's like, I saw another leopard. Things are
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. He's learning more Swahili, which is good. Yeah. He's doing good.
That's awesome, dude. No, I love hearing those stories. It makes me really want to figure out how to get down there with you guys. I think that'd be really a really cool experience.
Life changing. I
And
tell you, that's what everybody describes it as, is life changing.
yeah, and I know I say this every episode, but it is my wife's dream, and I need to be a better husband and just make it happen, right, dude?
Yeah. Hey, let's change the topic of the show to being a better husband. Let's do that.
Yeah, I don't know if I can. I can't speak for that. Sorry, dude.
Clearly, you can't
I'm
speak for that.
joking.
I mean,
I'm joking. No, I think it would be really cool. So, just need to get that nanny. Um, hey, let's get started with our episode today. Today, I got some questions. Um, my questions are we're going to talk about a couple buckets of patients. We're going to talk about PPO patients, fee for service or cash patients, and membership patients. The other day, me and my team were talking to several like multi-location practice owners, and they were grilling us with these questions that now I'm going to grill you with. um, I find it fascinating whenever anybody in the industry asks me questions. Um, there's a saying that we say here, whatever. I'm going to butcher the saying. Whatever fascinates your boss should intrigue you. My boss are clients and practice owners, right? Is how I look at it. Uh, Here at Boom Cloud, we don't have any investors. My investors are our customers. So whenever somebody, a prospect in the dental industry or a practice that we're working with has questions, I'm very intrigued by them. And so this is a list of questions that my boss asks me. All right. So the first question I got for you, Dan, is what is your conversion rate for treatment plans with PPO patients compared to patients on a membership plan?
okay. At Elevation Association, we do a lot of this type of data interpretation, data analytics. And
Mm-hmm.
so this one was actually pretty easy for us to pull. Uh,
Cool.
so this question, we were able to compare against PPO patient or membership, plan patients and cash patients.
Right.
And what was interesting about this was, let me just tell you the numbers really quick. And keep in mind, this is reflective of not every practice is going to have this
Yeah,
exact. There's other factors that go into it that I'll get into in just a second. But these numbers are decently close between PPO and patient benefit plan members, which they should,
sure.
if you think about it, because
There's
both.
similar, there's similar mechanisms.
Yep. So for patient benefit plan members, it's 40%. For PPO, it's 38%. And
Okay.
what's interesting is that cash patients are 24%.
Oh,
So yeah, an outlier. So, and let me get into
huh.
some of the interpretation, the data interpretation behind some of this. And this data interpretation is not exact. We're jumping to we're making some assumptions with this. So,
Sure.
don't hang me by this news. But what we can infer from some of that is that the conversion rate, the patient acceptance probably has more to do with how it's presented. Um,
Sure.
or not more to do with, but certainly that's a component, and what you would want to do in your office is take a look. If you have multiple providers in your office, that's kind of nice because you can compare and see, what the treatment acceptance rate is across providers. So, and if you have an outlier, like let's say that it's, around 40%, for most of them. I'm just rereading the question here. I've got it written down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you compare those different providers and one is low, then you
Yeah.
probably have a verbiage problem or a personality issue in your office. And
Good
so,
point. Yeah.
yeah, so taking a jump back to a bigger scope of things of like why this number is important. If you're a practice owner and you have an associate, multiple associates, or a partner, you're going to want to look at that and say, and then to look at your treatment teams. So what I mean by that is the hygienist with the provider, or the provider with the assistant, or the treatment coordinator, whoever it is, right?
What
And see
combo increases conversions together?
exactly, or where
That's
do you
smart.
have a low one, right? And
Yeah.
so, and we've been able in our office to identify that and say, hey, we've had a provider or a provider team that doesn't work well, or for whatever they put off a weird vibe or something, and so we've had to pull those teams in and say, hey, how are you guys presenting treatment? How does that discussion go? What does it look like? Because your
Mm,
conversion is 24% or 22%, or what, I'm making up the numbers.
yeah, sure.
And, that discussion, and sometimes, as an owner, you can go be a fly on the wall and listen to how it's going and go, oh, no wonder that is
Yeah.
awkward. I'm uncomfortable
Yeah.
and I'm not even in the conversation,
We
so.
we have in my business, I have associates. They're just not clinicians, right? We have salespeople that are my associates, right? And I have customer success people that are my associates. What we look at, we put them in pods too, very similar to what you just mentioned. Look, business is universal. Whether you're a software company or a dental practice, there are some universal things that we both do to optimize whatever, right? Optimize numbers for conversions in this case. But I know we look at the same thing here too at BoomCloud with our team members. Does sales rep A and appointment setter B and adoption customer success rep C, right? Those three people, do they work well together? And do they, one, get appointments to our BoomCloud 8 salespeople? And do those salespeople close those? And do our adoption people actually help that practice get adopted? And how can we move those around? So yeah, that we look at it the same way. And every time I talk about anything within the operations in the practice, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're doing the same things here at BoomCloud, just in a different, slightly different function.
Yeah,
Anyways,
I mean, the principles are universal. That's what's nice, is that you don't have
yeah,
to go very far to find good practice at principles.
yeah. Okay,
I,
that's
I,
interesting.
I
So, oh, go ahead.
oh, I do want to talk to the outlier, the 24% cash.
Yeah,
Uh, that one's pretty interesting because everyone says, oh, the ideal patient is a cash patient, which is true which is true. But you have to remember, we've had our patient benefit plan in place for multiple years now. So you have to, one of the things that you infer is that you've now transferred a decent amount of those would-be cash patients into your patient benefit plan, right?
yeah,
So now what's left over is going to be a certain percentage of those cash patients now that haven't joined your patient benefit plan are probably, transient, emergency,
sure,
these people that are coming in with, big issues. You look at them and let's say you treatment plan 5 different things because they haven't been to see a dentist in 10 years, and you're like, oh boy, you got a lot. And so their acceptance rate is low because they're just like, oh, we'll just fix the problem that I have, this thing that bothering me
fix the
today.
thing that hurts, and then I'll figure out perio
Yep.
later. Jeez.
Exactly. And then you don't see him again for 3 years until the next tooth breaks or whatever,
Mm,
And so you have to factor in, that's why that's one of the reasons why that percentage is probably lower,
yeah,
and then again,
that's interesting.
and then you factor in your transients, it's a lot of times, if they don't have insurance or they're not part of if they haven't invested into themselves, into the patient benefit plan, then they just kind of go wherever, right? And so,
Yeah,
you have to look at that as well. There's probably some other factors into that number as well, but certainly, those are the two big things that you'd want to look at.
that's interesting. Here's how I think about it when I see this data that you just shared. Um, I talk to fee for service practice owners all the time, right? And often they pound their chest and say, why would I give a discount to my fee for service for my cash patients when I'm collecting 100% of the fee, right? With this data, it's like, well, you're actually only getting them to 24% of those patients are going to say yes to treatment. The reason why you're seeing membership and even PPO patients say yes more to treatment is because it's a mechanism designed for case acceptance, right? Both are very similar, right? A membership and a PPO. The only difference is you keep the recurring revenue on a membership plan, and the insurance company keeps the recurring revenue on a PPO plan. That's the difference.
Yeah, and you and I have
It's
discussed
like,
the psychological component to that too, right?
yeah,
The add to cart component, which is, if I'm on Amazon and I'm
yeah,
looking at something and I know I'm getting it Prime, I'm more likely to add to cart. You know what I mean? And so,
yes,
because I want to capitalize on this thing that I've paid for, and I want to maximize my benefit from that membership. So, yeah, there's certainly a psychological component to it as well.
Yeah. No, that's great data. Okay, question number two, unless you've got another comment on this one, the first question. You good? Okay,
Go.
sweet. That was awesome. Second one is what is the retention rate for each patient type? PPO, fee for service, and membership plan patients, or
Yeah. So
loyalty rate, however you look at that, right?
yeah. So this one is hard to answer.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot. There's no data sets for this.
Sure.
But I do want to talk to a couple points regarding this. And the first one, and I've mentioned this in multiple podcasts. I've mentioned this in webinars that we've done, and I've mentioned this in CE events that we do, because I think it's really important, is that one of the things that drives me crazy, and marketing companies are guilty of this, crappy office
Yep.
managers are guilty of this, is is they will tell you really fast what the new patient rate is or average is, right? And so they say, oh, we get 50 new patients a month. Okay,
Okay.
great. How many do you lose? Right. And so,
Yeah.
and that's not tracked. People don't know like how many people
Really?
lose. No, and even if
I
they'll
track that
go,
like clockwork here.
they a lot of office managers don't even know how to do it. They'll just go
Hmm.
and look. All they'll do is they'll go and pull the previous month's active patients or patient base and then compare it to that month's active patient base and say, oh, we have a net gain or net loss of X. And
Interesting.
so then they go and they go, okay, well, then I'm going to go in and look at the new patients that we brought in. And then I can determine by factoring that into the equation how many patients we lost, which that's
Hmm.
fine. You can do it that way.
Yeah.
Uh, but it doesn't tell you which patients they are that you lost. You don't know where they went. Like
And to get them remarketed to or back into activation.
you don't even
What?
know, like, did they, then you have to pull in, if you do it that way, then you have to pull in your office team and say, where did this patient go? Do we know what happened to this patient? Like what happened? So, companies like Dental Intel, they build that into their system. And so you can actually go into a loss feature and look and see, okay,
Yeah.
this is where we lost them. They moved, maybe they passed away, maybe they
Sure.
transferred office, whatever. Now you can start to get granular on like what's happening. And usually once you have like we have a weekly review of this with our front office
Great.
team that we go through it and we say, why did they transfer? Why did they move? Oh, well, they just moved. Oh, this kid went to college. Oh, okay. But
Yeah.
it's like,
Not
they hated Dr.
they
Nelson.
hate Dr. Nelson. Yeah.
Yeah. Then now we have, oh, you made that patient mad. It's like, ooh, okay, but at least you can do something with that. But
Yeah, you can call them up and fix it. Yeah, if they moved, yeah, it's like cool. You're always going to have attrition or churn no matter what. Like there's no business that's free of that. I wish that wasn't the case. Building businesses would be and practices would be a lot easier without that.
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, I just don't want anybody to get, practice owners, you guys don't get too hung up on the, new patients per month because you could be bleeding patients out the back door too and not know. So,
Yeah,
you want to track both these. So to get back to this original question on retention rate, it's difficult to get into, you have to pull a data. There's no, like, none of these data companies make
interesting.
anything that would drop my pen, Jordan. That's awful. Um, Nobody makes any
Here, have
type.
mine.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, cheers. So what we're working on this right now at EA. We think this is an interesting question. I think it's worth
Yeah,
further discussion. So we're trying to create a database for this to find out what exactly the numbers are.
sure.
Um, I, there is something to be said about when someone feels like they are connected to you or your office, whether it's a personal connection between the patient and the hygienist, personal connection between you and the patient,
Yeah,
personal connection between whoever it is, whatever the connection is, that will create more loyalty and keep someone there. So now if they associate, I'm part of a membership plan, and there's a certain factor of ease to that, knowing that I
mhm,
can just go and get my cleaning, go get my, all these things, whatever you want to include in your membership plan. There is, again, we're going to get into that psychological component of loyalty to an office. So,
yeah,
and, so I we are going to get that number dialed in and figured out. But as of now, that's a tough one to get, but we will figure it out.
What I can do, at least on the membership side, since I have all access to a lot of the data on our platform, I can look at membership plan patients because I have start dates and churn dates within our data set. One, I bet you we can create at least for membership cohort of patients, we can create a metric on our dashboard within the Boom Cloud platform that will show the average retention rate for membership. I think that's a really interesting question too. So after this podcast, I'm going to go pull the data, at least on the cohort of membership patients, and we can see how, like, we can at least see the average days or months or years on a membership plan per patient within our database because we track that. And then we can also see churn rates like based off of yearly membership patients or monthly payment patients. Whenever I've looked at this in history, we've seen that monthly patients actually stay longer because it's an evergreen payment, under the radar type payment. But that's an interesting thing for me to do some homework on as well. Very interesting. Okay, question
Well,
number
I
three.
think, well,
Oh, go
before
ahead.
we move on to three, I think the other thing that's important to understand about this particular question and why it's hard to answer cleanly, I guess. I think even
Yeah,
when we run the data is going to be dirty. And what I mean by
sure.
that is that you can't make that causal. You can't say, oh, people are staying or leaving because of their patient benefit plan member or they're not.
Yeah,
Or there
because
was a
because people move and there's just a lot of nuance there.
Well, there is, and you
Interesting.
have to factor in too. I would say that a bigger thing would, again, going back to the answering this question in the beginning, is to track and see what your attrition rate is.
Mm.
That's going to speak more to, do you have an office-wide problem versus, what's your attrition rate on PPO versus patient
What
benefit.
is, I know you guys work with a lot of practice. What is like a common monthly or yearly? Let's look at yearly. That's probably a better cohort to look at. An attrition rate for like an average practice. Do you have that data on top of your head? I know I didn't
No, I
document that.
don't. I don't have it on top of my head. We would have to look at it. But when you were asking the question, it got me thinking right away
Yeah,
about the variance you have in, take our practice, for example. We live in a transient place because
sure.
this is a vacation community.
It's
And
kind of
so,
like Jackson Hole or Park City, right?
yeah, yep. So we get a lot more variance with that,
Mm-hmm.
where anytime you live in a transient place, you're going to see more action with that.
Sure.
Versus, a place like, I'm going to pick Salt Lake City off the top of my head, just because I lived there before, where people tend to stay there. I lived in Sugar
Yep.
House, where it's
Oh,
very
nice.
established and
Yes, very.
people don't leave, and so, looking at practices like that, we work with a practice in Salt Lake there in Sugar House that, they still have, a decent amount of attrition but again, there's a lot of variance that goes into that. So I don't know the number off the top of my head. I would have to look into that to pull that information. But again, there's going to be a lot of variance as to why. And I think it's going to change based on, where you live.
Location by location. Yeah.
Practices.
So knowing your data is just even more important because
Exactly.
whatever you hear on like a podcast like this or any other ones, it says certain data set for a specific type of practice that may be different for a practice in Texas versus Salt Lake. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, Jordon, the point that I think that would be profound to this talking point would be that, going back to what's your office net growth rate? And if you
Yes.
also need to go back and say, how many patients are we losing? How are we losing them? Why are we losing them?
Yes.
Because if it's
And how do we fix it?
Exactly, because it can be so many things that contribute to that. And if you are trying to grow, maybe you don't care, maybe it's the model. There's a group practice down in Arizona, that I won't say their name, but their whole model is over transients. They
Yeah,
thrive
sure.
off transients, and that's what they
Yep.
do. They don't care.
That's their niche. Yeah. That's
That's their niche. And
interesting.
so
And
it's
they,
not. for some offices, they're going to be like, yeah, I run a discount office and we thrive on the
We
turnover.
we had a
Do.
when I was at the dental lab with my dad, we had a client. They were called, I think, Over the Road Dental in Salt Lake, and they were very transient, like truck drivers. They were literally a dental office on top of a like on the second story of a big gas station for truck drivers, and they crushed it.
Yeah.
And it's all transient type truck drivers, right? That was their niche. And I remember talking to the doctor years ago, and they were doing a really like an amazing job growing, and because we were doing all their cases, right, at the dental lab. So I was seeing their restorative work every week, and they were killing it. So yeah, as long as you know your niche, and often I think though that location, the market for that, and our locations often drive the marketing, the organic marketing at least, right? Our locations are really important. That location drove that type of patient base, right? But the practice figured out how to adapt and serve that niche, which is really interesting to me. Um, and the same goes for any other practice, right? What is your organically, what is your location? What type of patients is it attracting, and how can you really niche down and figure out that cohort of that market, right? That's really what we should all do is practice owners. And no matter what city you live in, there's little niches that you got to figure out, right? That not every practice deals with.
Well, yeah, and I'll take us on a little I'm good at taking us off the tracks, but one of the things that we're working on right now that I'm pumped about is patient profile.
Yes, me too. I'm
Well,
obsessed with this. On my side, we used to call it ideal customer profile.
mhm.
It's universal what you and I are talking about. But yeah, this
Yeah. So
is
yeah, what
session.
we're looking at is two things. We're looking at what the ideal patient profile is. So,
Uh-huh.
and we can build that. We currently have the ability to build that at Elevation Association. We'll actually have you fill out a
We have
questionnaire.
tools and stuff. Great.
Mhm. Yep. And then we build your ideal patient profile so you know who you want to market towards. And then what we're working on now is building a existing patient profile. So that will help you to know, okay, who currently is attracted to my office, and so
Fascinating.
yeah. So, and that's really important information because if you look and
Yeah.
say, oh, people that are in this demographic tend to come here, that
Yeah.
helps you to know, well, maybe I
Just the
shouldn't rent
organic.
home.
That's what organically happening based off of your location and maybe some of your marketing.
Yeah. And
Usually, oh, go ahead.
oh, I think that would be huge if you're looking to buy, maybe you're an associate that wants to buy out somebody in a practice and you've just come on, or you're looking to purchase a practice, you want to see that. What's that patient profile look like?
Geez, that's really interesting. There's got to be some type of module you can create in software that automatically collects that criteria and
Yeah, we
displays
built
it.
it.
Sweet. Yes. That's pretty cool, dude. Yeah, I'd love to peek in that when we're bored on a Friday sometime.
Do it.
That's really interesting to me. Okay, cool. So we know that we have a saying, at least in the software world, that our marketing and sales causes attrition, which is silly. Not silly, which is interesting because when you think of like, well, salespeople don't cause attrition. They're bringing new revenue in. The truth is, they may be bringing the wrong ideal patient profile, the wrong customer profile, in my case, in, and it's causing attrition. We've seen that over the years when our salespeople don't understand the type of practice we're trying to attract here at Boom Cloud, we see attrition go up. Like for example, startups, we don't want to work with startups. That's just not our cup of tea, right? We like practices that have they're maturing practices with like two doctors are running it typically. They've got enough patient flow coming in through marketing or some type of marketing function, whether they're using an agency or they've got a referral marketing program that they're running in-house, whatever it may be, right? Or their location's in such a great spot, it's just getting organic traffic marketing to their practice. Regardless, like startups, whenever a startup calls up, we're like, hey, get get on with a marketing agent first, and then come and do this because you need patient flow, and then a membership plan could be amazing for the practice, right? Once they're a little bit more mature. So that's kind of like one of our ICP, and I have a whole documented like criteria on who we're attracting, and then emerging DSOs, right, do really well on our platform. So knowing your ideal customer or patient profile is so critical, because then you can go to market and use the right language to attract more of those patients, right? Starts with the front of marketing. Anyways, I geek out on this stuff all the time. It's
Oh yeah. I mean, you and I have talked about it on this show
I
before.
know we're such
It's just,
geeks.
it's so important. Well, yeah, but it's so important. And, and I think that generally we kind of don't know, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
it's like,
well,
I
and
don't know, but
if you do the math, like I was talking, who was I talking to the other day? I can't remember I was talking to the practice owner, and we were talking about driving new patients. That yes, new patient marketing is really important, right? But the truth is there's patient acquisition costs that you've got to pay back after a period of time. I don't know the average cost to acquire a patient. Again, that probably varies based off of your market.
I've
There's
got
so
a
much
marketing
nuance to
webinar that we actually talk specifically about the cost.
acquisition cost. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's great. But the truth is with new patients, it's like, well, we spend all this money to acquire them, and it takes time to pay back that initial investment. And that's, yes, you need to have that motion turned on to your practice, but it's really expensive, and there's still risks with it because of the payback periods based off of the customer acquisition cost or patient acquisition costs.
Yep.
So that's obviously you need to keep that on. The smartest way to like grow a practice is by increasing the average revenue per patient, which is just optimizing case acceptance, right?
Yep.
It's anyways, we can probably do a whole episode on just that topic. That would actually be
Well,
really
yeah. I mean, hey, Jordan, you took us on this tangent, but I'm going to keep this.
I know that we can go down there. That's the purpose of the
Yeah,
podcast.
let's go down this rabbit hole. So the thing about that, and this is one of the when we bring a new member on at EA, one of the first things that we talk about, in addition to getting the actual organization organized,
Yeah,
is we start to focus on patient retention, and
yes, great.
what we want to look at with that is, are they getting rescheduled? And
Sure.
so recare is a huge deal, and all I it's probably every office we've worked with when we ask them, what is your recare rate? What's your reappointment rate?
Is it like recall as well? Is that the
Yeah,
same
recall,
language? Okay,
reappointment.
cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and we say, okay, well, what is your reappointment rate? And they go, oh, well, it's probably, it's probably 90%. Well, probably, and
It's
I've said this
probably like
before.
it's like,
I think they probably,
wait,
so
you're
we
not
look at
measuring
the
that?
data and we say, actually, it's 60. You're 60% reappointment rate, which is abysmal, and so,
Yeah.
and so in that marketing webinar, I talk about, and it's on YouTube if anyone wants to go listen to it.
Send it
There's
to me. I'll put it in the show notes.
yeah, okay. So one of the big things about that is the acquisition costs. If you let that patient go away, and now you've got to go and get the new patient to replace that patient that you've just not rescheduled,
Doubled up your
because
acquisition costs.
how is it any different? If you don't reschedule a patient, you might as well have lost them, because they don't come in either way. So,
Yeah.
however you want to look at it, if they're in on your schedule, it's not an active patient. So
Yeah.
you have to look at it and go, okay, well, what is the cost to go and reacquire that patient? Never mind like getting a new patient in, just going to go get that patient back on your books. If you don't do it at the time that they are in the
There's a
office,
extra cost to that.
there's additional costs. So
Jeez.
we beat that drum nonstop, and we beat it to death, because you're wasting money. Anytime you now have a front desk person having to call that patient up, send them text,
Adding to the customer acquisition cost is how I would look at it.
it's exactly what's happening is you're burning overhead anytime
Yeah.
you do that. So that's a really important, I mean, we'll probably hit on this again just because it's that
It's
important. And
so important. Well, we look at the same thing here at Boom Cloud. Being a software company, you'd think we're so different, but it's the same thing. Like we look at that if people sign up and they don't adopt and they're not paying, like we have costs. And if my team is have to get back involved, like your team would if they're having to recall a patient back into the office for appointments, if we have to recall as well and get them to actually try to onboard and adopt and use our software, it's adding to the acquisition cost, because it's like, oh, these guys really aren't adopted and into our system. because we have adoption metrics just like a practice would, or activation metrics, or however you want to say it. It's the same thing. So no, that's really interesting, and yeah, very important for practices to really understand and dial that process in for the practice, so you're not losing and adding more to your acquisition costs. That was great. Thanks. It was great going down that
Tangent.
rabbit
Yeah,
hole.
it was.
That was great. It was valuable. Okay, here's my third question for you. What is the average revenue per patient for each type? For a PPO patient, a fee-for-service patient, or a cash patient, and a membership plan patient?
Yeah. Okay. So I love this question. I'm going to frame it in what we call the annual patient value.
Yes,
Uh,
that works too.
yeah. This is the easiest way the easiest metric for us to
Measure
describe
it.
that, yeah, to measure all of that. So, and this was shocking. And we've actually talked about this before, Jordon, on and off
Yeah.
the camera. Um, for, for our in-network, for our PPO patients, our annual pay at our office, and it's going to change. It's going to,
It's
but
gonna
I think,
change. Yeah.
yeah. So I just pulled, Ryan pulled it for just for our office.
All the way from Africa, huh? He's pulling that.
Yeah, yeah. And so we can pull it for other offices, but we just wanted to give everyone a taste for a very personal level, right? So we pulled it for
Yeah.
our office. So for our office, the annual patient value for a PPO patient is about 900, we'll call it 950, 960.
Okay.
I think the exact number was 961. And if you look at our patient benefit members, the annual patient benefit, or excuse me, annual patient value for those benefit members was more than double. It was about 18, it was right around $1,900 per patient. So that's crazy.
And that's just treatment revenue. That's not including the subscription, right? For the
That is
membership.
just treatment revenue. That is annual patient value of what that patient brings to the table.
Yeah.
So what
That's
can we
fantastic.
infer from that, right? Like, so what does that tell us other than obviously our patient benefit plan members are twice as valuable as our PPO patients are? Well, that sounds awful,
I mean,
doesn't it? But
it's just data.
well, that gets worded. But
Yeah.
what we can infer from that is a couple things. Is if we know that their acceptance rate is about the same, right?
Yep.
If it's 38% to 40%, we
Yep.
know that if they're worth double the value, that's because you're getting more return on per patient. You're not having to do these massive write-offs. So now we're back into the write-off discussion,
Yep.
and discussing the crappy things that are going on with insurance right now. The fact
Yeah.
that insurance companies are decreasing reimbursement rates, the fact that we are
Oh,
expected to
dude.
write off more.
I just did another episode on my other podcast. It's all dental insurance podcast. And more insurance companies are using AI to deny
To
more
deny.
claims. It's insane what they're doing. It's like, wow, what a great partner, practice owners. You get a partner that's not really caring about patient health. They're just bottom line. Like, look, I'm a capitalist and an entrepreneur. I like bottom line, but you got to balance it out between taking care of your customers and profit, right? It's always a
Yeah,
balance.
yeah,
Anyways,
it's huge. Like that is, think about that for a second. If basically what you're saying is that you could lose if you build up for every your patient benefit plan members, one of those is worth every two
yeah.
of your PPO patients.
So you can actually do less work if you wanted to, but by optimizing your patient type to like a membership patient, for example, you could do less work and make more money
Exactly.
as a
So,
practice. So you're not hurting your back and neck and shoulders every day.
we should probably, I mean, so my partner, Dr. Hill, was sick this week. And so we had a full 2 doc patient load. And Jordan and I were
Jeez.
talking off screen that I saw 52 patients yesterday. And like, I was feeling that. Believe me, when that number came across, my email this morning, I was like, Oh, I could, yeah, half sounds nice.
Oh man. Yeah, that's a big day.
That
A
was,
big
that was a big day. That was a
day.
big day. But yeah, I
Nice
mean, like,
job. Nice job, by the
yeah,
way.
you know,
Yeah.
uh, I, we're seeing that more and more though, where excuse me, practice owners are wanting to get out of network,
Yeah.
but are scared. They're freaked out that like, am I going to be able with my patient load? You know, if I let go of this insurance, how many
Yeah.
patients am I going to lose, right? And how's that going to
One,
impact the practice?
I have a story. Years ago, I talked to a practice in Texas. I was in Texas speaking at an event, and we were talking about going out of network and reducing dependence on PPOs. And, most of the audience is vibing with it, like, yeah, let's do it. Like, we don't want PPOs, right? But then there's this one doctor in Texas, and I totally get like how he was feeling. He's like, Jordon, I was talking after I presented. He's like, Jordon, I'm super scared to do this. I'm like, walk me through that, doc. Like, I'm genuinely curious about why you're scared. And he's like, man, if I cut out PPOs, like I feel like I'm going to lose all my revenue. I'm like, that is a valid concern. Yeah, and it can happen, right? And then I sat down and chatted with him for a little bit longer. I'm like, look, I'm not telling you to rip off the Band-Aid. Like that's the last thing I would recommend to a practice. Like this is a strategy, right? That you should go. I mean, you guys have been working on that type of strategy of reducing dependence on PPOs for probably a few years now, I would imagine. I'm assuming here. So you correct me if I'm
Yeah, yeah.
wrong.
I mean, in the different phases that we've gone
Yeah,
through.
it's a
So,
phase out
yeah.
strategy, and your office needs to learn certain ways to treat patients, ways to speak to patients. It is a whole culture shift within the practice, right, and the patient base. But I sat him down and I'm like, look, doc, identify the least, like your smallest cohort of PPO that's driving patients to your practice. Look at the out of network benefits for going out of network and see if those increase just automatically, right? And start with a small cohort. And it's just practice, right? Phase one is I'm going to practice this PPO has 50 patients that come to my office, right? For example, start with that one versus like Delta. Don't start with that one. That's probably the biggest one in most practices, right? But then I said, but before you do that, like you need a layer of protection, and that's your membership program because you can add those patients and say, you know what, we actually developed our own plan for practice or patients that are not on a specific PPO plan to get the quality care and benefits for staying loyal with our practice, right? And you start with that and you start to build up a recurring revenue pipeline, right? That's constantly driving recurring revenue. And doc, as you start to reduce one by one and build this recurring revenue machine for your practice, it will relieve you of that burden of loss because you're building recurring revenue while you're taking away like a PPO plan. But the reality is when you do, most out-of-network benefits are higher than in-network, right? When it comes to pay. So anyways, he's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that way. And he started doing that. And exactly that. He's now starting to reduce more and more over time. And he's not as scared anymore. But yeah, it can be really scary to go out of network. Especially if you build your practice in the PPO environment. So
Well, and I think you've hit on a huge, huge component, and that's you've got to have a plan.
yeah,
You absolutely have to have a solid strategy and a plan on how you're
yeah,
going to do this. And it's, most offices, especially newer offices, they usually have. I remember we were talking to an office in Idaho, and we said, well, no, Montana. I said, what plans are you taking? All of them. It's
every
like,
PPO under the
yeah.
sun.
I say, like, no, for real, which ones? He's like, I think it's all of them. I think
It's
he's
all
like,
it's
I
all of
think
them.
that we
Yeah,
do,
yeah.
yeah.
Probably like 5,000. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, he's like,
We're
our
on
office.
all the umbrella networks too.
Yeah. So it was like, well, have you thought about phasing off any of them? He's like, I don't even know where to start. And so that's a common problem. It's like, I don't know
Yeah.
what to do next. And so there's a lot of good advice out there and a lot of
Yeah.
good plans and programs and podcasts and webinars on how to come off of the PPO train. And
Yeah.
but it takes time, and it's
Yeah.
not a low energy, low effort kind of thing. There's a lot of discussion with patients, and it's a high investment as far as emotion and time, because there is a fear of like, oh my gosh. But with that data set in the back of your mind, if you go, that my patient benefit plan members are twice as valuable, monetarily as someone that's a, in-network insurance patient. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that takes a little stress off. And, I think that in speaking to the data of that, depending on who you look at or what you read, you can probably plan on a minimum of 30% attrition, if you
By
go out
going out of network.
of losing those in-network patients.
Okay. So I
And
would go
I would
ahead.
say worst case scenario, depending on where you're at, you can lose up to 90%. So you do
Sure.
need to look at that and go, if you live in a if you live in Utah, for example,
Yeah, Utah's bad.
that's so insurance driven in
So
Utah.
bad.
So you have to look at that and go, I could potentially lose 90% of my patients. I'm going to lose a minimum of 30 of
Yeah.
these, Delta, Blue Cross, whatever patients, and plan for that. And you have to look at it and
Yeah.
go, how many
I
patient
would,
benefit plan patients
I
do
was
I
just gonna
need to
say,
compensate?
I was just gonna say that. So if it's 30 and 30%, for example, calculate the revenue, what that equates to based off of your practice size. And then you can say, okay, before I start this, I need to create a marketing program to attract more uninsured patients, for example, or small business owners that don't have insurance. And if it's 30% potential loss, then you need to then building up a membership program prior to that is even more critical because you want to replace that revenue before it's lost in recurring revenue. So if you're $1 million practice and it's 30%, what is that? What is that number? 300,000 in potential loss? Do you have the math right?
I think
Gosh,
so.
now people are like, I'm so reliant
They're
on
going to check it. They're going to have
calculators.
the calculators out and they're going
Yeah, it's
to get
300,000.
mass
So
emails.
that's 25K a month in recurring revenue. So you got to find the average PPO or the average membership program across the United States is about $45 a month for a preventative care plan. So figure out how to get 300 to 500 active patients on your membership program, and that will replace that with in terms of recurring revenue. It'll generate about 25-30K in recurring revenue. But then you can start taking that off, and then we know the math now. Those patients are going to spend an average of 2 times more. On Delta, I think it was like 4x more. But on the average, I would imagine it's you said 2 times more. So by attracting that cohort of patient and getting them on, you're replacing the potential loss of going out of network with PPOs or patient churn. But then that cohort of patients are going to spend 2 times more. So it's like a huge win to focus on that first before you reduce, right? And just get your financial house in order in terms of patient revenue. So no, that's
Well,
really interesting data.
and one of the things that that has to be looked at is if you look at any of your cash patients, and I understand like what we were talking about earlier, like people saying, oh, I don't want to mess with that cash base because they pay 100% of my
Yeah,
fee. And it's like, well,
it's a myth.
that's you would think, right? But
24% pays 100%.
yeah, exactly.
It's
Yes,
it's a
exactly.
it's a percentage within a percentage.
So yeah, and for us, that's always a starting point for anybody that wants to move towards their patient benefit plan and building that up is okay, take a look at your cash patients.
Yeah.
And I get it. We still have patients here that have been longtime patients here that are cash patients. And for
Yeah, you're
whatever
gonna have
reason,
that.
they're like, I like paying more. And we're like, oh, all right, sounds good.
Sweet
But
dog.
yeah, but
Thanks for the
start with
thanks,
that. Yeah.
thanks for
You
the
know what?
swipe.
Great, great. We love you. Like, you'll get an extra Christmas card because we love that. But the that base of patients should be your target right off the bat to build your patient benefit plan.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
you should have some verbiage in your head of like how to present that and what that looks like. And, again, there's formulas. I love that Boom Cloud on your guys' website. There's actually a calculator that you can go in
Yeah.
and factor in and say, okay, well, let me figure some of these numbers out,
Yeah.
to help to figure out, well, what do we need to set costs on membership plans and all that. So, but
Sure.
that's where I would start for anyone that's like, yeah, I'm thinking about doing this is okay, look at your cash base and start moving those patients into your patient benefit plan.
Because they pay more when they're in their plan. What about, so if a cash patient is not on a membership plan, back to this number three question, what is the average spend annually per patient on the in the cash cohort?
Um, that one I totally forgot, Jordan. I didn't look, and
You good?
we will have to put the numbers in the notes because I do have
We'll put
them.
the numbers in the notes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. So we know in network is like 961 per patient, and then we know membership plans were like 1900
it was
in
pretty.
treatment
Yeah,
spend
I
plus the
don't remember the
subscription.
exact number, but I can tell you it was pretty close to the PPO number.
Okay, so comparable to a PPO number. Okay,
Yep. Yeah, which again, that's interesting, right? Like, because you look
very
at it,
interesting.
but you correlate that with if it's,
But only 24% of that cohort is actually like spending.
exactly, because and you have to look at it, at least for our office, you have to look at it and look at what that patient base looks like. And
Yeah.
again, that's your transients, that's your emergency patients. These are people, that probably need something, very acute addressed. And then
Yeah.
once it's done, they go away. So, I mean,
Interesting.
go look at that.
Okay. No, I love that data. All right, last question, and then we'll end the show here today. This has been great. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so question number four. What percentage of benefit usage do you see with PPO patients compared to those on a membership plan?
So this was a fun question. And this was one again that is super hard to answer.
Sure.
You know, the biggest reason that it's hard to answer is that benefit usage, if you're a patient benefit plan member, your benefit is infinite. There is no cap. Like
There's no
with,
limitation. Yeah.
there's none.
It's almost like the insurance companies don't want patients to get care.
Right. No,
With that
they don't,
limitation
because
clause.
they don't. Well, why would they? Then they have to pay for it, right?
Yeah.
So, um, there is no cap on your membership plans in your office. As a matter of fact, when you pull up we use EagleSoft, and if you pull up EagleSoft and you click on our patient, it populates the patient information, and it says insurance, and it says patient benefit plan. It says remaining benefits. It's the biggest number we can put in there. So because there is no cap to what that benefit is when you're offering a percentage, right? So
Yeah.
20% off of infinity is 20% off of infinity, so it's like where insurance, what percentage do they use up?
Yeah.
That is probably is an easier data set to pull from, but again, there's no precedence for that. We're having to create that. These are really good questions because it's made us dig in, and we're actually going to pull
Yes, I love it.
yeah, we're going to create some new data sets to answer these questions. But in the time that we had from the time that I got your message to today,
You're still digging.
well, it's really hard, like, because you have to look at it and go, holy crap, well, how that is a super hard one to answer, because you basically have to go through and pull, first of all, everybody's benefits. The number is different depending on what plan they're on, depending on what insurance company they're with, what plan they're on, all of that stuff. And then to go in, and you almost have to go in individually and go, how much did they spend out of that benefit? And then the other thing is like they offer, so if it's ortho, the percentage off is different than, say, like Crown and Bridge, which is different than, say, restorative, like,
Sure.
fillings. So
I
there's a
have
lot
some
of factors that go into that.
I have some data on the PPO side, right? So data from the National Association of Dental Plans, which is interesting because they spent like $500,000 on lobbying. Just that organization had spent $500,000 in lobbying to pay less to help the insurance companies pay less.
Yes, it is.
Last year, actually, here's an interesting stat that I just remembered from a podcast two days ago. um, insurance companies spent last year like $180 million more or less on lobbying to pay less to practices.
Judas. What
Gee,
does that tell you,
didn't that
right?
piss you off? This article here is saying the Association of Dental Plans indicates that very few dental enrollees, so patients, reach their annual maximum for in-network services. They're saying in this article 5% utilization for PPOs, right? Which
Yeah.
makes sense if you look, and I'm digging into this more to make sure that this is accurate, but I would imagine, yeah, right here, here's the quote. Very few dental enrollees, 5%, reach their annual maximum for in-network services. Most people don't hit the maximum, meaning insurance companies been around for a long time. It's a game for them. They've figured out psychologically how to get the patient thinking less, right? Not saying yes to as much treatment because it's psychological. We know that too, that I think the average maximum is like what, $1,500 still hasn't changed.
Usually, yeah.
It's
Mhm.
like, what is like an implant crown cost all in? Like, what is it? I know it's going to vary, zip
An
code.
implant crown, yeah. I mean, an implant crown in our office is we'll just call it $1,500. It's a little bit more than that, but yeah, we'll just say
Yeah.
1,500, which
Is
they
that
won't
with
pay
with
100% on.
yeah, sure. Okay, that's interesting. And then I'm sure there's other work that you got to do that goes into that cost,
Yeah,
right?
they pay 50% of that 1,500. We'll just call it 1,500 for ease of
Oh,
numbers. But we
that's
pay 50% of it. So and
that's
here's the
silly to me.
well, I don't like that data set. I think that data point is bad.
Yeah,
First of all, because if they say only 5%, but if their benefit is 1,500, let's say, because again, that number hasn't changed in how many years,
yeah. Since the
which is
70s, I think.
just awful.
Yeah,
But let's say they have 1,500, and let's say they use $1,499. And so they still have $1 left on their
sure.
benefit. So it dirties the number, and,
Yeah,
and so I don't really like that, but it
yeah.
does tell an interesting, but
That's a
still 5%.
30,000 foot view data. Yeah,
Yeah, but I do think that if you look at it and you say, okay, well, uh, only 5% are maxing out,
yeah.
and I think that that's something where we have to take that seriously and apply it to what you were just saying is that insurance companies have been at this for a long time, and
Yeah,
they
they
absolutely
figured
built.
this game out way before you opened up your doors in the practice.
They thrive on a scarcity mindset, and they
Yeah,
thrive on this idea of getting the patients to believe that they cannot do any additional treatment beyond or doing the minimal amount of treatment
well,
for
yeah, the
that.
PPO patient says, I will only do what my insurance covers. It's like, well, you're not going to get much. You get $1,500.
Yeah, and we talked about this before, and this is infuriating to me, and I want to get this back out because I want to hear, I want to see pushback from our providers. They need to know this is happening in multiple states. Insurance, through our members that I've been talking to, members have gotten letters from insurance companies threatening them,
Yeah,
that they will drop them
very
if
common.
that they are doing unnecessary work, which these are docs that are extremely moral individuals.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like these are helping the old ladies across the street kind of quality docs. These are amazing guys
The
and
red tape put on practices by these corporations is insane.
this scare game pisses me
Yeah.
off so
Yeah.
bad. Like to send a letter to a provider and say, if you don't stop doing crowns, we're going to drop you.
Yeah.
You've done X and X. And so now what it's forcing, I was on a forum the other day, a dental forum with this topic on there. And it
Uh-huh.
was just, comment after comment after comment about, we're having to use AI, photographs, multiple images, as far as radiographs, and
Yeah.
send all of that into the insurance. Otherwise, they'll deny them. And now they've gone to not
Well,
just
yeah,
deny,
the AI
threatening
denials. Dude, you listen to that podcast that I just did 2 days ago on AI
about AI.
denials.
Yeah.
It is insane that how tight they're getting on denials because of AI, right? It's like how do we use AI to fight back, right? And that's what that episode was about. But it's insane what's going on. And it's like, oh my gosh, if you're not adopting and changing with the innovation, you're gonna get left behind in regards to denials.
Oh, totally. And and for Jordan,
Jeez.
we use Pearl. There's an an
Yeah,
unvetted push for Pearl,
yeah. We're
or a
friends with
vetted push for
Pearl.
Pearl.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's up,
So
Pearl? We love you guys.
hey,
There's a lot of Utah Pearl guys, so we see them. They come visit us at the Boom Cloud office all the time.
So yeah, we use Pearl, and and I love Pearl for multiple reasons. I won't get into why I love Pearl, but I really
Yeah,
love Pearl.
we can bring them on and talk about them.
But I think it would be good to have, an actual provider of an AI software come and chat. But,
Yeah.
one of the things that AI, it's not perfect yet. And anybody that uses it knows that it tends to pick up burnout sometimes, that it'll pick out like a tongue line or something like that,
Sure.
where, and it just happens because it's not perfect yet. But you have to keep that in mind when you look at your AI and know the insurance is using that same freaking stuff on their end and saying, oh, we're using this to deny this. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, you're using an imperfect system. And now you have to go fight that, and it's getting so
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah, it is. Cause like often I think of dentistry, I'm like, man, we got to do as business owners, we've got to justify like our expenses with like the IRS, for example.
Boy.
And now it's like, yeah, let's barf. And then it's as a practice owner, you have the insurance companies, which is like an auditory, like an IRS, like a secondary clinical IRS, where they're like auditing and making it really difficult to run the company and there all this unnecessary admin costs, right? Because if you look at like everything we have to do today to like manage our businesses from just an IRS perspective, it's like, man, this task that I'm doing today doesn't really serve like bookkeeping, for example, doesn't really serve the business. It serves the IRS. And what what you're saying today in dentistry is like you have that, and then you also have the clinical side of it to fight for your patients to get the care they need because insurance companies are doing the same type of audits to pay less.
Well, and
I'm
anybody that's
sorry, it's
oh,
ridiculous.
it's so true. And anybody that's had to deal with insurance in the last, 2 years, you've definitely seen that push. Policy's been changed,
Yeah.
insurance company, because all of a sudden you're seeing, you know, weird things happening across that you've never experienced before. You're like, what is all this red tape that the insurance companies are putting us through? And so I think that it's important that people be aware that that's what's happening,
Yeah.
and again, we need to talk to our state, dental boards and appeal to the ADA.
Yep.
This is stuff that is really, really important that these groups that represent us, that they represent us correctly, and that there's pushback
Yeah.
because
I agree.
how much money did they spend on lobbying? What'd you say towards
They spent
to pay
more or
less?
less, yeah, more or less. I did an episode on this 3 days ago. It's like all I do is podcast. Um, 3 days ago, I think it was around like 100, between 160 and 180 million last year in lobbying, right? Just so they don't have to pay claims out, right? That's all the money spent on, which is silly to me because it's like I love capitalism and privatize capitalism a lot because we can solve a lot of problems in the private market. But whenever a private business or a nonprofit goes and whines to the government and says, protect us because we have a shitty product.
Yeah.
And it's not really serving people. That's why lobbying exists, right? Is because they're scared that people will churn out and they'll lose their revenue source. It's like, but the truth is, we should allow people to choose the best service for them versus forcing them to do it through lobbying. That's all. That's how I look at it.
No, I agree.
You know what I
100%.
mean? But no, yeah, it's a large amount of funds every year that go to lobbying. It's insane. It's like maybe we can create a coalition of practices that we can then like do a lobby like a lobbying for practices against it. If we get a coalition together, I've talked to attorneys on this. This is how geeked out I get on this type of topic. Like, how do we create a coalition of lobbying of like a whole network of dentists to then fund a lobbying effort on behalf of the practice owner side against insurance companies and all that stuff. I'm sure there's some that exist, but yeah, that's what I think about on the weekend sometimes.
This is what I do when I'm in the
This,
bathroom. Is I think about,
yeah, this is my morning routine.
yeah,
Anyways,
shower thought, shower thought.
shower thoughts.
Yeah. The thing about this question, Jordan, the question number 4 here that we've
Mhm.
been talking about, and I don't mean to like dismiss the question, but on top of everything else, that question is a little bit it's kind of unnecessary. The
Yeah.
question really
because
does
because
affect. I mean, so what if they use 100% of their benefit? What does that tell you? That doesn't really tell you a
yeah,
lot.
that's actually a good point, because at least with a membership plan, it's like, well, 100% is infinity because there's no cap or
Right.
limitation. No,
Yeah.
that's great.
So even if a patient comes in and uses 100% of their benefit, right? Let's just say
Yeah,
that they're a train wreck and they need full mouth rehab. So
sure.
they use up 100% of their benefit. Well, what does that tell you? That doesn't tell you. We want to go back to that annual patient value that gives us a
That's
lot
the
more.
more important. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Question number three is more important.
much more important. So
Yeah.
don't get, anyone listening to this, don't get hung up on that question. That's not
Yeah.
really, whether
I
or
agree.
not someone utilizes their benefit or not. There's some peripheral information that can be, drawn from that. Like, would they be better off on a patient benefit plan if they're not utilizing all of their, benefit, and they're, if they're private, if they own a company and they can make that change, is that a pitch you want to say to them? Is like, hey, you can actually save a lot of money by dumping, your insurance company and coming on board, bringing your company on board to our patient benefit plan.
Yeah.
You're going to save, X of thousands of dollars, depending on how many, employees you have. To
Yep.
that point, it's probably worth discussing, if they have a
Yeah.
healthy employee base. But
Yeah.
beyond
That's what we do
that,
with all of our employees.
yeah,
Dr.
exactly.
Dr. Anderson loves us down the street. What's up, Dr. Anderson?
Him
Uh,
and Dr. Anderson.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we actually just started getting ready to sign up to an optometry practice that we're helping do the same thing just here in Lehigh. Um, so Dr. Gray, excited to get on board on your vision membership plan. So there's a
Much
shout
fun you
out for
can
Dr.
have
Gray.
with vision, like, you know what I mean? Like a
Yeah.
vision plan, like there's so much like fun marketing you could have with like having a vision plan. Just think about that for a sec. Like you go nuts.
You can go nuts. Yeah.
Yeah.
They do really well that in that industry. And it's they actually have worse PPO problems than dental. It's alarming to me. They treat them worse than the dental industry. I feel bad for the optometry industry with the insurance companies in there. They're sharks.
You're saying there's people worse off than with all
Than
the
dental. It is
BS going
super
on than
sad.
dental? Wow. All
Yeah,
right.
it is
Medical's
hardcore.
raising their hand. They're like, hello.
Hello, yeah, no, yeah. No, dude, this has been an awesome episode and a lot of data, a lot of fun. And it sounds like as we both do some more homework, we'll have some more data to come in future
Totally.
shows. So
Yeah, and too, if anyone has any questions on this, I think that they, reach out to us, reach out to Jordon.
yeah,
Let's, our email is really easy. It's always on our webpage at elevationassociation.com.
yeah,
It's just elevationassociation@gmail.com. So if you have specific questions about your office, or like, hey, I'd love to get some answers. Like, we love doing that stuff, and digging in and helping people make sense of or collecting data or making sense of their current data. So,
yeah, that's great. You
and I
guys
know
can help
you
with
guys have
that.
got a lot of resources on your end too. So I think that should be something that people know is available to them.
Yeah, if you're interested in increasing the average annual revenue per patient, membership plans are the way. We've got a lot of calculators, ebooks, webinars on our site that you can download and consume, and as well as scheduling a demo, looking at our software program and how it can help you launch and scale your patient membership program. So, Dan, awesome episode as usual. I look forward to every Friday because we have really awesome, high quality, in-depth conversations in dentistry. So appreciate it, man.
That was rad.
It was way rad. So with that said, all of our listeners, we hope you guys have a rocking day.